Saitama is about to show the number 1 S-ranked hero Blast why he no longer deserves to have that title. My boy Saitama is the true strongest hero in town, and it's about damn time he starts getting recognized as such, don't you think? In chapter 194 of the manga, we get a massive surprise when we see that Flashy Flash, Saitama, and Minako plan to see Sitch to help set up a meeting between them and Blast in order to discuss the existence of God. We saw that in chapter 193 and 194 that Flashy Flash is really invested in this and thinks that they're only a small step away from uncovering a massive truth. Well, Flashy assumes that for a guy like Blast that hops between dimensions, he'll likely be a pretty difficult person to reach. Well, to their and everyone reading's surprise, the dude was right there chilling with Sitch the whole time. Well, not only does that mean we'll be getting this super hype meeting between some of the strongest heroes in the series, we'll likely get an answer to a question that's been on the minds of many One Punch Man fans since the Monster Association ended. And that question is, does Blast know how insanely strong Saitama is? Or did he get reset along with everyone else after Saitama time traveled? Because we gotta remember that pretty much everyone besides Genos doesn't remember anything that happened in that alternate timeline where everyone died pretty much. It's a question that I've personally been waiting to get answered, because who can forget that insane fight between Blast and Garo that nobody expected in the manga, just for Saitama to show up and do a massive serious punch right in front of Blast's face. We even saw how stunned Blast was from how much power was being put out by this serious punch, so it's definitely something that he would remember. This is likely a question we're going to get an answer to right away, because Blast will either berate Saitama with questions about how he's so damn broken and likely try to test that strength, or if he doesn't remember anything, then he might have an opposite reaction with the same result, where he questions why some lowly A-class hero with a bald ass head is here talking about top secret information like this, and tries to size up Saitama with a quick battle. Really, you can make a case for either scenario, because honestly there's evidence to support either one. For starters, there's a good chance that Blast was immune to the mind erasing that occurred when Saitama traveled back in time to begin with, and therefore remembers everything. This is because he was likely in a different dimension when all of this happened. We learned in the Monster Association arc that Blast is capable of literally manipulating the power of the cosmos. He can open warp gates on command that let him travel between dimensions, like we saw while he was witnessing the fight between Saitama and Garo. Specifically the moment where Garo hits Saitama into the earth so hard that it bowls the other side of the planet. It seemed like he was observing this from some separate dimension. In fact, it seems that Blast and the One Punch Man equivalent of the Justice League, I guess, pretty much operate in a different dimension altogether. And I'll explain why that's a very important detail in just a second. Just hold on to that for now. First, we also have to remember that before merging with his new timeline version, Saitama remembered everything from the original timeline, even though he had already traveled backwards in time. On top of that, he still managed to hold on to Genos' core from the previous world line, with all the information of what happened still in the data of that core. Without getting into time travel and multiverse theory and all that crazy stuff, it's likely it wasn't as simple as Saitama going back to the point before everybody died and ending the fight before it happened with the Zero Punch. The mere fact that there were 2 Saitamas at one point and there are still currently 2 Genos cores means that it was more of a multi-dimensional travel where Saitama jumped to a different world line where none of the crazy cosmic Garo stuff happened yet. Then after successfully stopping Garo, the 2 world lines merged together, causing the 2 Saitamas to merge, and technically made it to where their original fight near Jupiter and all that crazy stuff never happened. That's why Saitama and everyone else other than Genos' core doesn't have a memory of it. So at this point in the manga storyline, you can completely forget about that other world line. It doesn't exist anymore technically because it merged with this one and became one. Now, the reason you should give a shit about any of this is because it almost guarantees that Blast remembers everything that Saitama did against Cosmic Fear Garo. This is because if Blast was in another dimension at the moment that the 2 world lines merged, it's likely that Blast was not affected by the memory wiping that it brought, since he technically would have been in a space between those 2 world lines or something. His ability lets him sit in between dimensions pretty much. So when the 2 world lines merged, he didn't merge with his former self like Saitama did or something. He just stayed independent of everything that happened. So what might have happened if this were the case is Blast went back to a separate dimension after diverting the Serious Punch squared with the help of his super friends or whatever you want to call them. He stayed in that little separate pocket dimension until after Saitama had defeated Garo, and of course traveled back in time. So when Blast went back to Earth using one of his hyperspace gates, he was probably confused as all hell, wondering how everything got back to normal. Hey, maybe that's why he was with Sitch when Saitama and Flashy went to go look for him at the end of chapter 194 to begin with. Because with all the stuff he has to do across the universe or across dimensions or whatever, he's obviously not there for no reason, right? He might be looking for some answers too. In this scenario, Blast will see Saitama and immediately ask him what the hell happened and how he saved the world. Saitama will obviously not know what the hell he's talking about, and Blast will challenge him to a quick little fight or something to confirm that he wasn't just like tripping the F out and imagined the entire thing. Earlier in the chapter, we saw that Saitama was finally fed up with all the extra attention he was getting from everyone when he said to Flashy, Sonic, and Genos, "Give me a break with things like become my disciple, be my rival," and stuff like that. I don't really want to teach or learn or compete or anything, pretty much telling them to F off. Of course, they all completely misunderstand this statement and think that this is Saitama saying that he's not worthy of their praise or something, and they try giving him a pep talk before Saitama gets frustrated and leaves to go play video games with King. He's obviously just sick of all the nonsense and doesn't want to get involved with any of this God stuff either. He's just helping Flashy in hopes that he leaves him alone after he's done. That means that in the event that Blast tries to test Saitama to see if he's really as strong as he says he is, our boy won't waste any time in making Blast sit his ass down like he did to Flashy Flash at the beginning of chapter 194 when he threw the death punch at him. After that, Blast will likely spill the beans on things like what happened the day that he met God for the first time, where we also saw that he had a partner that might have low-key gone to the dark side because we don't see him at all in the manga. We only saw him in that flashback, and the dude looked like a ninja, so he might be like the next big bad for Saitama and Flashy Flash and all that, because it seems like this arc is definitely more like ninja focused like the previous one was for psychics. So my money would be on him being the next big bad fight if he did end up taking God's power that day. I mean, if this guy was a former partner to Blast, he was likely at least on a similar level as him, at least in terms of power and ability. So if he ended up accepting power from God, you can only imagine how much of a threat he'd be if he's still around. I mean, God found a random homeless guy and turned him into a dragon level threat, so yeah, I'm sure dude's pretty strong. Blast might also shed some light on why there's a cube at the ninja village where Flashy Flash and Sonic were from, and that's a little detail that we definitely cannot forget about. A cube being at their former ninja village is something that might have got lost in like the hype sandwich that was the beginning of the chapter where Saitama threw that death punch at Flashy, and the end of the chapter where Blast came back randomly. If neither of those two things happened in that chapter, we would definitely be talking a lot more about this God cube being at their ninja village. Maybe the cube isn't there anymore because Blast has been hunting them down for over 20 years now, so maybe he picked it up at some point. Well, if his former partner actually did become one of God's disciples like we just said, this means that he might even be the leader of that ninja village and betrayed Blast by stealing one of the cubes that they had collected for research. I know it doesn't seem like a likely scenario, but One and Murata might have some fun with this arc, so I think it'd be a pretty cool thing to see. But let me know in the comments below if you think I'm an idiot or if you agree with me. And while you're down there, subscribe maybe? Anyway, there is a good chance that everything I just said earlier is a bunch of bull and Blast doesn't remember anything like everyone else. And if that happens, he'll probably not be too excited to share such confidential information about God to someone that he views as a regular A-class hero. So like I said earlier, he might try to size up Saitama to see if he's even worthy of hanging around. And again, we'll get put in his place by our boy. In either case, we'll be getting a better idea of Blast's capabilities as a fighter and might witness Saitama do crazy shit like kick away his warp gates like he did versus Garo. Really, it's a win-win for us One Punch Man fans because we get an awesome fight with some incredible art and we get some more lore building with valuable information about God and the cubes. Also, if Blast does remember everything because of the dimension hopping theory we just talked about, then that means that God is also aware of how strong Saitama is since he witnessed him defeating Garo too. This is because it also seems like God is operating in some multi-dimensional space, since like his essence might be locked away in the cubes or something. We already know from Sitch that God is interacting with our world more and more often now because he's being attracted there by something. When he says this, a panel of Saitama from behind is shown, so it's clearly referring to this something being Saitama. After witnessing him do things like sneezing away the freaking surface of Jupiter, this will only cause God to be more aggressive with his pursuit of Saitama, and Blast might catch on to this. This would open a whole whole can of worms where we actually find out why God is so interested in Saitama to begin with. Is it because he removed his limiter? Is it because he keeps defeating his disciples like God and maybe one's like Vaccine Man or something? Or is it simply because they're both bald? Hopefully Blast holds these answers. The third and probably least fun scenario is that Blast doesn't fight Saitama at all and just dips out of there before he gives any valuable information. That would kind of suck. Regardless though, we're likely in for a big chapter, so we might as well sit back and enjoy the ride no matter what happens.